And I really do believe it's because my roots are strong that I can fly. You know, I don't sit in those places at Los Angeles or Cannes or wherever and change. I'm the same person. And I also was very privileged to grow up with two older brothers, Vikram and Gautam, who had no room for pretension. So I grew up with severely distrusting pretension and having a high barometer of, excuse my French, bullshit. So, you know, none of that really played in my life. So having a strong foundation in exactly how you've seen it, you know, kind of almost a socialist India, where it was nothing to do with money or five-star hotels or anything like that. It was to do with being, I guess, educated and also finding enchantment in small things, you know, in things, and also having an unscheduled life in a certain way. It wasn't about, you know, knowing exactly what to do. But I was pretty industrious. I used to have goals. If I wasn't going to be a good sitar player, I'd like to be a writer. I would try that out and all of that. But I think it's the rootedness. It's my rootedness in my family, not just in my born into family, but also in my married family, my husband Mahmoud Mamdani and our son Zohran and our sort of coexistence. It's that rootedness that enables me to have a groundedness, I suppose, but also a language and a vocabulary in the arts, in cinema, that when I make a Monsoon Wedding, and it's completely, you know, like it is in Delhi, it's a reality check of our family, is a globally, the cusp of global India, you know, but a drama of a family. It was made in response to Hum Aapke Hain Kaun, which is a wonderful Bollywood film that had 21 songs about a wedding, and we all had fun, but it was nothing to do with what it was like, really. Yeah. So I made a film that I could see myself and my family in it, and my family is in it because they were all free and didn't charge me a dime. But, you know, but to make that film and have it be seen in Iceland and Hungary and Hollywood or wherever it went, and Venice, you know, in Venice we won the big prize and so on, enables, say, a studio like, I think it was Focus Features, to give me Vanity Fair. Yeah. You know, because Vanity Fair, they came to me because they knew, everyone has to see an example, they knew that I could perhaps make a drama of a family that, in a sprawling kind of, and yet specific and funny way, you know. So, but when I'm making Vanity Fair, they come to me for my vocabulary, for my sensibility. I'm not there to be on an A-list and say, okay, what should I make that will give me the best, you know, the biggest rewards or whatever. You know, I want to be, and I think I am, not just any director on an A-list, you know, which is why I also turned down Harry Potter. I had an offer to do Harry Potter 4.
I'm going to stop you there.
Yeah.
You turned down Harry Potter?
Yeah.
Why?
I turned down Harry Potter because they saw Vanity Fair and they saw how vibrant and whatever, voluptuous and successful for them it was. This is Warner Brothers. And they thought, well, they'd had a big success with Alfonso Cuarón from Mexico making Harry Potter 3, so why not, you know, get the Third World Rainbow Coalition making Harry Potter 4. And I, you know, I was deep into making The Namesake at that time. And The Namesake, this beautiful novel by Jhumpa Lahiri, really, I had suffered my first death in my family, you know, of my mother-in-law, who was like a mother to me, and an unexpected death of medical malpractice, and completely blew me away, and I was deep in that melancholy, and that's what inspired me to make The Namesake, because Jhumpa has written in it of this terrible melancholy of losing a parent in a foreign country, which is exactly what I was experiencing. And so I was deep in the throes of, almost a month away from shooting The Namesake. And they offered me Harry Potter. And I thought I had to take these meetings because my son had learned to read from Harry Potter. And I went several meetings and I was in the throes of it, and then I was very troubled to be able to give up my own film. And I asked my 14-year-old son, Zoran, what should I do? And he said to me, Mama, many good directors can make Harry Potter, but only you can make The Namesake. And And it was such a liberating and clarifying statement, and it kind of is about how I have lived my life, you know, like that, is that what can I do that is so specific and that you cannot do? You know, how to make my distinctiveness my calling card, in a sense, you know, how to trust my own instinct, because really instinct is the only thing that, you know, that is particular to each one of us and that defines me or from you or anyone else, you see. And what happens in Hollywood and what happens in the mass marketplace is that they work on you to lose your instinct. They work on you to become part of something that is, you know, supposedly the mainstream. Where in my case, at least if I preserve it, like The Reluctant Fundamentalist, it is the hardest film I ever made because it took 5 years to finance that film. And I've never had trouble really raising money. But because it was a big film, many stars, global kind of appetite, many countries, it cost some millions.
And a politically incorrect message
for
the studio system.
Completely a hot button film, you know. The white folks have a lot of coming of age stories, but there's no coming of age story post 9/11 of a South Asian young man who loves America and then gets disillusioned. That's a very amazing and very, it spoke to me so deeply what Mohsin Hamid wrote, but to finance that film, even with my career and so on, was not simple. But it's about, you know, trying to tell a story that is also finally not going to be watered down or tampered with. Because if I went to the studios to tell that story, it would not be the story you see now. But to try and raise money that is independent and free of those kinds of rules is why Reluctant Fundamentalist, you know, is itself, you see. So that's the struggle always, how to preserve your voice and how to preserve, because my craft, unlike the book writing craft, requires millions and it requires a lot of people, and it's actually a bit of a con game. You have to convince people that you have to let me, you know, do this, and that takes stamina.
Let's go back slightly chronologically. I think the time most people heard of you here, at least most people here, was Salaam Bombay. And that film was an international sensation. Yeah? You were hailed and feted all over the world. What did that do to your sense of self, and what did you feel you were going to do next? Because at that stage, you were queen of the world. You could have done what you wanted.
Well, you know, you say queen of the world, but I see it like 9 months of back-breaking publicity in every country, in every hotel room, 50 journalists a day. One has to realize, you know, also Salaam Bombay, like you said, was the first Indian film to get international distribution in every single country. And yet I did not have real stars to promote the film like I do with Vanity Fair or I do with Amelia Earhart. I have Hilary Swank, Richard Gere, Nasiruddin for this one, whatever, you know, lots of movie stars who are supposed to now go out and sell it. With Salaam Bombay, it was incredible. Street Children, it was Anita Kanwar, Nana Patekar's, all their first films, not Anita's but Nana's, Tilotama Shom, it was all their first films, Irfan Khan, all first films. And no one, the marketplace just wanted to talk to me, you know. So it was a lot of work to promote it and to make it be seen. So I really didn't, I swear, go to bed thinking I was a queen ever. But it was powerful for me because the film just continues to live on. But the dream we had with the film, which is how to make life the better for, or work with street kids and honor street kids, to give them back a childhood that they had turned their backs on for a better way, you know. That was not to be found when we were shooting Salaam Bombay. So even the shooting of Salaam Bombay, I worked with a child psychologist, Dinah Stafford, to work with institutions in the course of making the film. That we could support and endorse, but really there was not one. There were institutions that would clean them up on Friday night and give them dinner and put them out. There were institutions like the chiller room in government that would put them away, but there was none that honored them as street kids and that gave them a childhood and a future and an education. And so the great privilege of Salaam Bombay was that we created Salaam Balak Trust, which is now 29, 30 years old. Salaam Bombay's profits went into creating this Street Kids Foundation. And Sanjoy Roy, who founded this festival, is on the board. And my mother is a professional beggar by training. She's a social worker, Praveen Nair. She runs the Salaam Balak. Several people who run it are here actually. And now we have close to 17 centers between Bombay and Delhi, and about 5,000 children coming through our doors, and incredible success stories of children, because of the arts in our centers, really finding their voices and sometimes finding their families. So that was the burning and very idealistic and somewhat crazy question in Orissa, in Bhubaneswar, when I grew up, was, can art change the world? Can we do something? Can I do something? And Salaam Bombay, in that sense, does change the world, has changed lives one by one. And you know, in my now, 30 years in making films, that's a great privilege, because you can't do that each time. You can't actually have a venue or a forum that does that each time. And the fact is, because of these extraordinary people running the trust, it actually just continues and really thrives, and that's beautiful.
But Salaam Bombay did three things. One is it drew attention to street children. There's the Salaam Balak Trust, all of which we've talked about. The second thing it did was it put Indian cinema on the map in a way it hadn't been before. Is that fair? The kind of release it got, no other film had that kind of release. Yeah? And the third is it put you on the map.
Yeah.
What did you do next? And how did you feel?
Well, when I showed Salaam Bombay at the Cannes Film Festival, I had no money to live in a hotel at Cannes, so
really?
I rented a
Even
pension.
After the success?
No, during,
okay.
while it was showing.
Yeah.
And I rented a pension, a little room with an old lady in Cannes, and of course we didn't have cell phones those days, and in the sales brochure of the festival, it's like, where do you contact for Salaam Bombay's sales? I gave the lady of the pension's number, and that was the only information that I could give. There were no emails, nothing. And that night after the premiere, which was fantastic, and many 30-minute ovation and all of this, I came back to the pension about 6 a.m. and that phone, poor lady, it just kept ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. And by the end of like 10 hours, I had sold like the entire world without quite knowing how to do it, but except America that held out. But you know, so the next year was taken into publicity, and it was taken into just selling it and promoting it in that sense. But I was offered every child of every hue by Hollywood, you know. Any film that had black children, brown children, white children was given to me. And I, again, had the good sense to not accept them. And I thought of an idea, which was, when I got a scholarship to go to Harvard University from Miranda House when I was 18. And I went there as an undergraduate. I'd never left my country. And what was unique at Harvard was that I, as a brown person, was kind of in between the white and the black communities in school. And I was accessible to both, but sort of lines were drawn in some sort of visible and invisible ways. And this became the core of my second film, Mississippi Masala. I wanted to make a story about how I saw the hierarchy of color. And I happened to read in the exploration of this about the Asian expulsion by Idi Amin in Kampala, where Indians who had never known India and lived in Africa, East Africa for 3 generations, were suddenly asked to be expelled in 90 days to go away. And they had, you know, generations in that country. And they, for reasons like, you know how Indians, we don't like to rent, we like to buy. And they could, one of the big things that they could afford to buy were these dirt poor motels in Mississippi. And Mississippi in the South America, it was also the birthplace of the civil rights movement and the largely African American community, and African Americans who did not ever know Africa. And so I thought, just in my head, what if the color, the boundaries, what if there was love between both these sets of people who had never known where they were supposed to have come from, and what if they would meet in this place? So that film was my next film.
That's actually quite a daring film to do after having made a film on Bombay, right?
Well, yes, and also when I pitched that film, even though I was getting to be known at the time, I mean, lots of studio heads were, one guy said to me, and I had Denzel Washington, and he had just won the Oscar for Glory about a week before he signed up with me. And I went to a studio and I offered this whole film, and I said, it's Denzel, and it's this unknown young Indian woman, and so on. And he actually, the head of the studio, asked me, will you please make room for a white protagonist?
Really?
Yeah, and I said, I can promise you one thing, that all the waiters in this film will be white. And you know, and he looked at me and he laughed, and I laughed, and I was shown the door. And that's one thing I tell people, you know, who want to be crazy enough to make films, is that you have to learn to take courage from rejection. Like, you have to almost be spurred on by rejection, because it's going to happen every day in some capacity or another. And it's like when I had that, it's like, I'm going to show you, you know, I'll show you. But you have to kind of almost be turned on by it, because otherwise you just will give up. But yeah, so I mean, it's quite clear. In those days it was very clear, and now it's a shame-faced thing. They call it Oscars so white, or this or that. But 1989,
it was that open.
It was, well, he said this to me, and you know, I was supposed to, you know, change my tune, but yeah. So
but
yes, it was a very unusual film at the time, and it, I think, still is.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
And one of Denzel Washington's best performances, I think. Yeah?
I think so. Yeah.
But you know, all film industries, and I say this, I think I've seen a bit of the Indian film industry, are full of bullshit, and they're full of sharks. Yeah. At the end of the day, the creative person is swimming against sharks. I'm sure that's true of Hollywood as well. We can't just be, you know. So how do you cope?
Well, you swim with those that have, who take you further, and with whom you share something. So I have worked with a creative family that is fluid, but the core people, the cinematographers, the editors, my producer, producing partners, I mean, people with whom, and they're very international, South African, Indian, you know, American, Irish. I mean, it doesn't matter really where they come from. But as we begin to invent a language together, it is very, that's whom I cherish, you know.
But that's still creative. What about the money and all of that? That
well,
aspect.
I also have my agents, the same people for the last 35 years. They're very close friends. But mostly you have to have a strong sense of self-belief, you know. And a strong sense, I think for me what works is family, because I don't live inside the filmy universe 24 hours, you know. I recover. I also am an aspiring yogi, and that helps me a lot, because without Iyengar yoga, I could not be making films. I could not be doing pretty much anything. So it keeps me, try to be equilibrium, because...
When did this Iyengar yoga thing start?
Iyengar started, I've been doing it irregularly since Orissa, but I started to study Iyengar when I was 40, which is exactly 20 years ago. Yeah.
And it keeps you sane, keeps
it
you
keeps me sane, it keeps me strong and flexible. And a very good thing about yoga is that it teaches the art of resistance and surrender, when to resist and when to surrender. And with filmmaking, like several arts, and you have to create solutions. You know, you can't just ask an actor, do that again, just better. Although I've heard directors do that, but I don't do that, and you should not do that. You have to help that person to bloom. That is the task of a director. So if it is not happening one way, it has to happen another way. And yoga, amongst other things, but yoga teaches, just through the learning of the body, that if you can't do this, don't force it, but find another way that you achieve what, you know, like if you can't do Shirshasana, you'll find another way, especially BKS Iyengar was such a genius that he invented real props, so that a 90-year-old person literally can achieve the same benefit, you know, that you can do as a 25-year-old without a prop. So anyway, so it just, these are things that keep me
grounded.
Yeah.
Grounded.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'd be a drug addict. Yeah.
I'm sure there's a halfway house.
You know, well, not really.
We spoke about Denzel. One of the many things you're noted for within the business is your ability to discover actors and get the best performances out of them. I mean, Denzel is one example. Irfan, you said you more or less launched. But say Riz Ahmed, who now, after the Night Off, is this big star and is on all the talk shows. I think his single best performance is the reluctant fundamentalist. Tabu, who is one of our most talented actresses, has never been as brilliant as she is in The Namesake. So how do you get this? What is this ability you have with actors?
Well, you know, there are two things. One is that I have been an actor. I started as an actor from the age of 16 till
the Cleopatra days.
no, even post the Cleopatra.
Right.
So I work with actors absolutely with love. You know, I love actors, and it isn't about demanding. It's about finding and helping. You know, the second thing is I came to filmmaking, fiction filmmaking, through documentary.
Yeah.
Through what we learned and was taught as cinema verite, which is the cinema of truth, which I was very privileged to be taught by Ricky Leacock and Penny Baker, who were both great, who invented essentially in some ways the mobile camera.
D.A. Benedict.
D.A. Benedict.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's
I
one
don't
of
know
my real teachers.
He's
and
God, no?
Yeah, and he's 92 and going very strong. And when I made those kind of films, like I made a film, India Cabaret, you know, and that was the time of unmanipulated documentaries, where you just choose a subject. That subject was, you know, I wanted to tell what the line that divided good women from women who were considered outside goodness. So I lived for 4 months with strippers in Antop Hill. They called it Antoffi, and I didn't know Antoffi meant actually Antop Hill. Yeah, in Bombay. And after only 2 months of really getting them to know me, I brought the camera in, you know, and the sound in, and so on, and was filming. And over a year, those kinds of films take a lot of patience to make. So working in documentary like that, and making a narrative that worked in the editing room, and not wanting to manipulate, not saying you look there and then you smile at all, ever. It taught me, you know, also how to work with real people. I love working with real people, you know. So even in my films, I always cast, like Denzel may be one, but then opposite him is Sarita Chowdhury, who's a girl I saw on a motorcycle in London, you know.
Who's now, of course, a big star with Homeland and all that, but then was and she was in a hologram for The King with Tom Hanks. But then was
that's only now.
Yeah,
no,
but
then
it's completely
she was a girl
unknown.
on a motorcycle.
Completely unknown.
You know, she was a film student. She studied film theory. She didn't even want to be
an
actress.
So you discovered her, really?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she didn't even want. She was not thinking of being an actor at all. So it's how to take the reality.
So what do you see in these people?
It's instinct. It's love. It's with Sarita. What I loved was her lack of vanity and her sort of wild beauty that was not fettered or vain or. And was just this fierce intelligence, you know, and she was not, there was no falsity in her. I'm always drawn to people without falsity, you know. If you look
Shefali Chaya?
Shefali Chaya, I was just going to quote her. Yeah, she's amazing. I didn't quite discover her.
She had
she
one
was
film
in
before.
Satya,
One film
and
before.
I called her up and I just cast her unseen as Ria in Monsoon Wedding.
And a very different role from the Satya role.
Yes, and I'm going to work with her again soon. So it's I see things like that. I mean, I remember in Monsoon Wedding, we were making it as an intimate family little film. I mean, it was just an experimental film. And several people I had cast let me down the day before shooting. So there was one part that I had cast my childhood friend, and the day of the shoot, I get this pink scented envelope saying, "Sorry, yaar, Mira, I got a TV serial, I can't come." And it was terrible, and I needed a large, you know, Shashi auntie, you know, and a comedian, very good timing. So I went walking in my handkerchief park in Vasant Vihar, and I saw a lady who looked fantastic and wearing sneakers and her sari and just marching right along. And I started to speak with her, and she said, हाँ, एक तो वीडियो हमने किया है, म्यूजिक वीडियो. ऐसी बात नहीं है कि मैंने कैमरा नहीं देखा. She said. So I said, मेरे साथ आइए please, घर यहीं है, 5 minute के लिए. And she came home with me, and I gave her a scene of Monsoon Wedding, Shashi auntie, you know. She's the auntie from Muscat who's all bling, and she's just hilarious. The way Sabrina Dhawan wrote her is fantastic. Anyway, I started to read with her. And she was amazing. The timing, the look, the fun, the fact that she didn't think she was funny, but she was really funny. It was just great. So I said, Benji, you've got the part. and she name is Kamini Khanna, and she was fantastic in the film, and now then moved her housewifely status, went out the window. She moved to Bombay after the movie, and she has, poor thing, been playing Shashi Aunty in about 18 Bollywood movies ever since. And so I actually do cast, like that. I mean,
So you see something in them, clearly.
yeah, a certain amount of desperation in me, I mean, and lots of things.
Okay, they're asking me to wrap up, but I've got to ask you, since we're talking about Monsoon Wedding, it's the hum aapke hain kaun, but what you managed to do in the sense of a Punjabi wedding is show the underbelly, that scene about incest and pedophilia and that theme that runs through it. Now we talk a lot about it. In those days, nobody talked about it. Was that deliberate to put that in and to have it done?
Of course,
tell us about
everything is deliberate in cinema. Everything is deliberate, and the thing was that we wanted to make a film that really captured the masti, the intoxication with life that Punjabis, especially like us, are known for. But I did, and Sabrina did both, want to put this other side, because this is the side, frankly, before even the Me Too campaign, we have all experienced, you know, and it is never to be talked about, you know, whether an uncle, you know, treated you in a certain way, felt you up in this way, or whatever. There's every family, everybody I know has a story. And so I very much, and weddings are times when secrets explode and drama happens, and the family deals with it in some way or another, but never this taboo, never is this discussed. And that was something we were both committed to. But even my inner circle of friends said, Mira, if you really want to capture masti, which is that intoxication, you cannot have such darkness.
Yep.
And I remember I used to sleep in my king-size bed. I would sleep on one side. On the other side were all the index cards of each scene of the film. And I would constantly be looking at this. And one night, I took away all the cards that has to do with the incest theme. And I looked at it and I thought, you know, if we take it out, it will just be a piece of fluff. And really, without darkness, there is no light. And without silence, there is no music, you know. And it is that balance. It is, if you can achieve the balance, and that's where Shirshasana comes in. You know, if you can achieve that balance, but in the most exquisite of ways, that is the beauty of making something that will remain as art, you know. And so that was the balance. But because I had these wonderful actors and many non-actors too, also the thing with non-actors is that there is no artifice, you know. Shashi Aunty did not know how to, you know, have tricks, you know. So the actor opposite her, who's done 100 films, has to drop the tricks so that we can create that truth in a way. And that was what everyone sort of came together and did. And so we could achieve, I think, that exquisite balance that made us tell the story of such darkness, but with, I think, a lot of pain, but deeply amount of love, so that it became a kind of cathartic film for many, many people around the world, because they could finally lift the silence that most of us are shrouded under when faced with such abuse.
And it was very unusual for its time to talk about those issues. You want me to throw it open? Yes.
I just want to say one thing, which is I've spent 10 years
Yeah.
making Monsoon Wedding into a big Broadway stage musical.
So just
And
explain
we,
that to people, that
and
it's now taken on a life of its own.
Well, no, it's no life of its own, because we're still ghasawing it. But it takes, no one does it for you. But we've just opened it last year in Berkeley, California, and I met a young woman here who just had seen it, and here she is, and it was a big, big hit. It ran for 4 months, and now we are revising it and hoping to bring it both to India and also to Broadway in 2019. So please wish us luck for Monsoon Wedding. But happy to open it now.
How long do we have for questions? Okay, we've got time for questions. The way you do it is you put your hand up, I recognize you, you address your question. The lady in the front row, please. We give you a mic. Please tell us who you are, and then we ask.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Khyati, and my question to ma'am is that as a South Asian women director, how do you select categories? Like, which is the most challenging part to select a category for your movie? Is it like to choose between caste and gender, or religion and gender, caste, class and gender? Or
Oh, I never think of things like that. I never think of categories. Like, okay, now I've done incest, now I'm going to do fun. No. I don't think like that, madam. It's more about, you know, stories that I see in my life that get under my skin, and that may be stories that do more than one thing always. Every scene, every moment has to do more than one thing. So that even, let's say, Monsoon Wedding, since we were discussing it, it's not just about and only about the darkness, you know, but it is about several other things. India going global, you know, Cuban cigars at dining tables, Mr. P.K. Dubey, you know, who won Tentwala, turned event management, you know, the aspiring India. It's about a girl who wants to be a writer and be left alone and not be married. It's about a girl who just wants to settle down and marry the NRI. It's about the world we live in a sense. So I really don't think like, I've done this, now I have to do that.
Did you mean that, or did you mean in terms of subjects that do you think?
Yeah, in terms of subjects.
Like now I'll do a Western subject, now I'll do, you mean that kind of thing, or?
Yeah, but she made it very clear.
She's answered it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
And also like, when do you think that filmmaking become a political act? Like today we're seeing all these bans on movies, and even your movie Kama Sutra that you made was banned. And like, when does filmmaking or cinema became an act, a political act?
You know, I actually think that every film is a political act. Every piece of work should be a political act, because it's about one's point of view. You know, if I were to be a Hollywood director constantly making, you know, films about their reality, it is a political, I mean, I don't do that, because I really believe, you know, I made a very interesting American film called Hysterical Blindness with Uma Thurman and Juliette Lewis, and actors I love. And I recently ran into Juliette Lewis, and it was an award ceremony, and we were all having a few glasses of wine and pretty loose-tongued, and she says, "Mira, when are you going to cast me again?" And I said, "Darling, when white people interest me, I'll cast you again." You know, so it's a political act, you know, to make a film that is right here in India, or to make my last film, which is Queen of Katwe, set in you know, a Ugandan slum in Kampala, where I also live. It's a political act to make an African film with not a white savior to come in there to help a kid learn how to play chess, and that kind of trope that we've always been given. So I think every point of view, even how you frame something, you know, who you favor. If you look at Cry Freedom, it isn't about Steve Biko, it's about Donald Woods, you know, because they learned how to see the world that way. And as a result, we in the audience learn to see the world that way, you see. But it is a political act to make it another way. So I do believe that everything it's not only when the government gets involved with you that it is political. It is political even in the framing. Yeah.
Somebody else? Of course, lots and lots of people.
How about
Shall we? Yeah, the front?
Yeah.
And then we'll go back, I promise you. Yeah.
That lady, just get up and speak.
Hi, my name is Kritvi, and first of all, it's been an honor sitting here and listening to you speak with Mr. Sanghvi. And my question to you is, has your experience in theatre...
Hold the mic.
Mike nearer.
Has your experience in theatre actually helped you become a better director?
Okay.
My experience in theatre, definitely, and you know, because of understanding the nature of how to perform, how to act actually, what is false, you know, what is real. It's a different style of performance for the camera without the camera, and it's been extremely humbling to make 30 years of movies and then return to the stage as a director, as I have just done with Monsoon Wedding. And that's been really humbling, because in the movies, as a director and as an actor, you know, I spend 2 months, say, shooting, and then 4 months finessing in the editing room to make the actor, to make the moment, to make the music, to make everything work as whole, utterly finessed and sharp, you know. Whereas in the theater, you have to do all that in advance, and then you perform, and there's no safety net, there's no safety blanket. And also, it's very interestingly yogic, because theater is ephemeral. Theater never will happen again. That moment will come and go. You can't, movies, they are immortalized, but in theater, it's just like that. So that's been the yin and yang, the going back and forth has been very interesting. But I think it did help me, mostly for performance, and also sometimes to understand how to pace a story in both theatre and film, how to pace and rhythm. It's different, the language is different in both, but at its core, it's about narrative and how to hold how to hold the audience. So it's interesting to do both. Yeah.
Somebody at the back. Just microphone, just give it to somebody at the back. So please identify yourself.
My name is Anil Gupta. Mira, it's a question and sharing something also with the people. 34 years back in the old Palais of Cannes Film Festival.
30, exactly 30.
30 years back. There was a 20-minute applause for Salaam Bombay. Did you expect that? And that was the last film in the old Palais actually. And also, did you see that this kind of resonance will be there with the audience, which is not aware as to what's going on as far as those children are concerned?
Okay.
Thank you, Anil. Anil happened to be there in the Palais on that night. Certainly no, I had no expectation at all. I had never even been to a film festival until that time,
Really?
Really.
Never?
Never, because I had never made a feature
film. So the first
film.
time you go to a film festival, you get a 20-minute standing ovation.
It is true.
You can spoil one, no?
And also, the Bhagavad Gita has this very interesting saying, which I really believe, which is to beware the fruits of action, and to never treat what you do as a stepping stone to something else, but to do it fully and completely. And so I promise you, I never went there with any expectation, because if you have that expectation, then you almost ruin the moment of the present, So no expectation, but in terms of the children, that is what I desired, that is what I dreamed of. Because a big film for me that gave me the courage to make Salaam Bombay was Pichot, a Brazilian film by Hector Bebenco. And I went to a talk by Bebenco at the Museum of Modern Art before I shot Salaam Bombay, and he gave me the courage to say I could do this, even though I had not made feature films. But the day we were beginning to shoot Salaam Bombay, 1 year after that, I looked at the Times of India, and the front page had that little column that said the young boy who played Pichot, who was also a street kid, was murdered that day in Brazil. And I really vowed that we cannot let this happen to our kids, And it was a double sort of whammy, and I really had to make sure that our intention, which was always there, to set up a trust for kids, was further endorsed by this terrible murder. So I'm actually very, as I said earlier in the talk, really pleased to have such an extraordinary army of social workers and of believers in street children to have kept Salaam Bombay, Salaam Balak Trust running. Yeah.
Somebody else? Last one, somebody just said to me very ominously.
This lady who's waving.
Which?
Yeah.
Can I take this?
Yeah, this one.
Mira and...
just this young woman, sorry.
We'll come to you next.
I'm Uma Prakash, and I've seen Salaam. Of course, Salaam Bombay is amazing, but you're Queen of Katwe. Oh, wow. What did you do? How did you get so deep into that? How? I mean, it's amazing what you did in that film.
Thank
it was Salaam Bombay again, but in a different venue.
Thank you.
I can't tell you what that book has done, movie's done for me. I've seen 2 days running, I think I saw it. It was so brilliant.
Wow.
Well, wow.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the lady said Queen of Katwe is what she was referring to was my last film, which is based, I have lived in Uganda for 29 years, and it is my home. My husband is from Uganda, and we fell in love when I was shooting Mississippi Masala. And I've lived there ever since. And I also have created a film school there that's 14 years now old, called Maisha, because very much a belief that if we don't tell our own stories, no one else will tell them, and that Africans must make African stories rather than the world coming and interpreting the life I saw around me, on screen. And Queen of Katwe is a true story that was brought to me, oddly enough, by Disney the studio because the vice president of Disney is a Ugandan, and he came to my garden in Kampala and he showed me this little news clip, and it said that this girl from 15 minutes away from my house, the terrible slum of Katwe, had just won the Grandmaster prize in the Russian Chess Olympics, and she was an illiterate girl. And he said, would you be interested in this film? And I said, immediately, yes, but I'd need to meet her and so on. And it was and then I met Fiona, and she had just played Kasparov, and she had won him, and she'd won $25,000, and she had bought the only house that her mother had ever had. And I met all of them, and we really got close, in fact, and began to write the story with Bill Wheeler, a great writer who wrote Reluctant, but in a documentary style. I actually went with her mother, saw when she was evicted, the streets on which they lived, the verandas, the shops, you know, whatever they did. So we conceived it very much from their real life. And I think that makes a big difference. And just like Salaam Bombay, in fact, Dinah Stafford, who cast Salaam, cast Queen of Katwe, just like that film, we cast on the streets. So all the children are from Katwe and Chibuli, and Lupita Nyong'o, who just won the Oscar for 12 Years a Slave, is from Kenya, which is across the border, and David Oyelowo, who plays the coach, is from Nigeria. And so we also had sons of Africa and daughters of Africa being African, which is very different from an African-American actor playing African. And because I live there and I love, this is my home in many ways, it was the chance actually to tell the story with the humor and the language and just the way it really is, which is like, it's a very stylish city. You know, Kampala is the center of used clothing in the world. And so my fish lady in the village next to me sells fish in an original Pucci dress with an African kitenge cloth. That's just the style it is, you know. And I wanted to do all that in this movie, and we did. So it's a film that is very much like life is really lived, but made with real people who live there and also great actors. It is that same balance between both. But also it's the great story, you know, of a girl achieving something with not alone. It's not an individual, you know, like a rara, I was nothing, rags to riches type story. It's a girl who has her mother who doesn't believe her, the community, the street. Like it takes a village to understand your own genius, you know.
Okay.
I could have gone wrong, but thank you for telling me I went right.
Okay. There was one person who started asking questions and then I interrupted that person.
Yeah.
So please, whoever that was, so please finish your question, whoever it was.
Thank you, Vir.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you for remembering me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mira, my name is Vivek. I live in America. It's a privilege to watch your movie. Wonderful contribution and the wonderful gift you have given to us. One comment, watching Namesake. I'm the first generation immigrant living in America, but the second generation immigrant, kids going there, watching that movie, coming home with the eyes tearing, giving them a hug, is awesome experience. So thank you for impacting the second generation of Indian overseas. Thank you for the great work.
Thank you so much. I think we can end that. Thank you very much. Glad to be of use.
I think we're out of time, alas. What can I say? A big hand for our very best director. A woman who's made India proud all over.